Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. I'm your host, Chauncey Hallworth, and this is my co-host, Sean. This is an awesome paranormal and conspiracy show about everything.
Move over all other paranormal and conspiracy shows. We're on the scene.
Move over with all your fake news. We got the best fake news around.
Yeah, this is premium fake news.
Premium fake news.
Yeah.
So, I'm talking to my wife today, and she's like looking through Facebook, and some girl has posted about how she hates Gwyneth Paltrow, and she's the worst actress ever, and she needs to go die with her stupid bird face or something. And, like, it got me to thinking just how terrible people are, you know, to the point where...
aren't great.
You know, to the point where you can, like, you know, really have a personal opinion about Gwyneth Paltrow. It's like...
On the plus side, though, I feel happy for this person.
Why?
Because if you're at a point in your life where you're angry about actresses, you've got to be... You can't have that many real problems.
Everything else is coming up.
Right.
You know, just awesome.
I mean, people are like that. When you remove all the real problems, you come up with, you know, imaginary problems. That's
are you making fun of me for being entitled because of our prior conversation?
No. But, I mean, I could be.
Entitled people, you know, yeah.
I think it's weird that that's how you interpreted it. But hey, okay. Yeah, I mean.
You know, so this got me thinking about, like, you know, politics, and everybody is just fighting so hard. And I had read some other Facebook post where some guy had said that today I went out and I drove around and I had a gun and I wore some Nikes and I bought some Starbucks.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And I, you know, did all this stuff and like... And, you know, he had a really good point. And, you know, here we are, you know...
And the punchline was, it's called being normal.
It's called being normal, yeah.
Yep.
And I think that, you know, I think, obviously, let our political opinions out there just a little bit. That, you know, we're more on the left than maybe a lot of people on our radio station, you know. And so I just want people to know out there that, you know, as long as you're not a bigot and a jerk, you're all right.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
You know, you're all right.
Yeah.
You know, I don't really care about that.
Or if you're not a Keynesian economist, then, you know, you can die in a fire.
I don't know. You lost me there. What is that one?
I have no idea. It doesn't matter. I was being facetious.
So something else funny in the news. So
as
here we are.
As opposed to classical economics.
I see. Yeah, that's fitting, you know. Yeah. As long as you're, you know, not a...
I mean, those people are unholy freaking heretics.
Right, totally. You know? As long as you're not a...
As long as you're not one of them.
A globalist communist.
Exactly.
Or a
No, I think
nationalist.
that's the opposite. Because I'm liberal,
I know.
so I think I like
I picked those on purpose.
Communists. Oh, okay.
All right. So, also in the news, it is smoky because there's a new fire.
Oh, my God.
And it's brutal. And it's funny because the car fire was so close to here, but the smoke coming from this Delta fire is like worse, way worse.
Yeah. Well, I think
as far as air quality,
mostly a fluke of the wind.
Right.
What's going on, but the last few days were horrendous.
The news had reports. So my wife picks up my daughter from school today, and my wife's feeling nauseous because of the smoke.
Can't blame her.
My daughter gets in the car and she's just, I'm feeling nauseous because of the smoke. And you know, Terry's talking to me, and she's just all, you know, I'll get sinus problems. My eyes will dry out, but I'm never nauseous because of it. And then there's like this report on the news about illegal pot grows catching on fire and meth labs and like honey oil things. And like, so basically there's all sorts of like just crazy drug shadiness going on. 'Cause, you know, we're kind of like at the corner, the very corner tip of this sort of green economy. You know, coming up from us is really where it starts to get wild when you go north.
Right.
You know, is really, you know, and so this is where this fire is pushing. And so, so apparently we're all getting loaded.
Okay. I didn't notice anything other than, you know, headaches. So.
Yeah, well, you know.
But, you know, maybe I wouldn't.
That's how squares
maybe I'm too far gone.
That's how squares and noobs respond to it. You're a square and a noob.
I am a square and a noob.
All right, so what's going on with you this week?
Oh, not a whole lot, but I've got to say I'm, speaking of conspiracies and fake news and all that kind of stuff, this whole bit with the editorial in the New York Times, I'm sure you've heard about that. Everyone's heard about that.
I'm back and forth on this one, and this is why I can probably be called...
It's insane that this is even a thing, though, right?
Right. It is a little weird that people can get so invested in anonymity.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly... Okay, there's a number of insane things about this.
It's insane as to the way that this White House might be running. It's insane that people back up anonymity. I find the whole thing just totally ridiculous. I think...
Right.
I think the real conspiracy here is to keep us spinning. I've said it before that for some reason I'm supposed to know how to fix the economy on a global scale, but if my car breaks down, I'm supposed to hire a mechanic. It's ridiculous. It's like, I can't, my wife literally has educated herself to the point of being an accountant to do our taxes. She spent years training herself, and now she's really good and really fast at it. But, I mean, it is not a like, hey, let's sit down and take care of our paperwork. We're really organized.
No.
But it is not so easy. And this whole world, I think, has us set up to spin so that we don't focus on anything.
I mean, I don't think it's intentional. I just think...
I don't know. We're conspiracy
The world is very complicated. It becomes exponentially more complicated, the longer this whole civilization thing goes on.
But you don't think people are making it complicated on purpose?
I think, well, it depends on what you're talking about. I think taxes, definitely. I think, the stock market, definitely. Well, really anything financial is probably, in large part, people making things more complicated than they need to be so that their specialist knowledge is more valuable. Because it's the same people deciding how complicated these systems are who are being paid to unravel these complicated systems. So, of course, there is an incentive to make them complicated.
Right.
But other things, I don't know, medicine, the human body is just really complicated. Insurance, that's probably more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah, medicine, too. Look at the opioid crisis. I mean, that's people pushing drugs. The drug pushers. I can't go out and grow broccoli. I cannot grow broccoli in my backyard and start a broccoli company without investing massive amounts of money.
I feel like, though, that's an issue that is inherently complicated. No one went out of their way to make it complicated.
I don't know. Charles Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie, he could have started a broccoli company.
Well, okay, we're talking...
Is Charles Ingalls, that's a conversation stopper.
I'm aware of
he was a real guy.
People, yes, but, I mean, with technology and all, you can't be a little farmer on the prairie or whatever. In order to be at all relevant, you've got to integrate yourself into these tremendously complicated Leviathan systems.
Right, you got to become
that will crush you if you step out of line.
Yeah, cybernetic gutter pumper.
But but I would argue no one's really in control of those things, which is kind of scary. I think.
I think they're all...
It's all just spinning crazily out of control, and who knows where it's going.
We're coming up on the break here. I think it was all little people trying to make little things complicated in order to seize control of their industries. All right. Coming up here.
Big topic there.
Big topic. Coming up here, we have T. Fox Dunham, host of What Are You Afraid Of podcast and the new medical mystery thriller, Mercy. Come on back. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest, T. Fox Dunham, host of the podcast, What Are You Afraid Of, and author of a new medical thriller, Mercy, all caps. Do we have you there with us?
I am here, sir. How are you?
Do I call you T? Do I call you T. Fox?
You can call me Fox. I'm very happy with that.
Okay, Fox it is.
It's my totem spirit, so.
Yeah, I've never been sure how to roll with the first initial. Because I always said that if I was going to be an author, I'd be C. Charles Hallward, because that's my middle name, because it sounds cool. But, I mean,
the first initial stands for pretension. That's important.
Right. All right, so how are you doing this evening?
I'm fantastic, and hello, Radio Wasteland from the East Coast. I think I'm the only one left out here. We're all running from a hurricane down in the south.
Are you threatened by that at this point, or?
Hopefully not, but they're saying it's going to come up into the Maryland area, so we'll see. We're definitely getting a lot of rain.
Well, we're on
running
fire.
from fires, so we'll meet you in the middle.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Kansas,
okay, so we're all rushing to the flyover states then.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Where we'll all be taken down by a tornado, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so I wanted to, in the first segment here, to talk a little bit about your podcast. What are you afraid of? I love the title. When I said it to my wife, she's just, oh, that sounds great. Because, she just wants to dig into the fear of what I think she was thinking like irrational fears of clown suits or something, But can you tell us a little bit about your podcast?
Sure. What Are You Afraid of? Horror and Paranormal Show. I started the show because as an indie author, we do more promotion than we actually do writing out there stumping our book. And with my health, I can't really get out to a lot of the writing events. And of course, public events are often sparsely populated with audience members too. So I started the show to basically say, buy my book. And because I'm a horror author, I picked horror as the topic. And we decided to do a mix of horror, paranormal, ghost stories, little comedy, some banter, and use my connections in the horror writing community to bring on guests and new horror fiction and basically reach out to publishers, readers, and other authors.
Sounds great to me because I am, without a doubt, the most hardcore horror fan I know. It's kind of
like the show.
It's kind of lonely.
And funny about the title, when we did it, we were just sort of all sitting around spitballing, and somebody said, "Well, what are you afraid of?" And it just clicked, that moment where it clicks, and you're like, "There it is. There's the title." And without doing any research, I set up the title, and we got all these religious fans coming to the show. Apparently, "What are you afraid of?" is a popular evangelist phrase for people. What are you afraid of dying? Are you afraid of hell?
Oh, I see. Well, that seems positive.
Yeah, well,
in a way.
So that's where we built our market there. So.
Well, luckily, when you're dealing with horror, you're dealing with the paranormal, or you're dealing with anything sort of counterculture, there's really no such thing as bad publicity.
Right.
As long as you got those people talking about you out there, that's good. So what are some of the topics you have on here? Can you give us an example of a recent topic? My interest is piqued.
Well, I think the episode we have coming up, which is episode, it should be 95, we have a psychic on, Michael Bodine, and he's a world-famous psychic. He's friends with people like Melanie Griffiths and Gary Busey's a friend of his. And he came on to tell us about some paranormal experiences he's had. And one of the more interesting topics he brought up was a secret meeting of vampires, real vampires, in the woods.
Interesting.
That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I have a soft spot for vampires.
Yeah.
I know quite a few.
There you go.
I'm a huge fan of...
we don't usually meet in the woods, but,
Well, apparently you're missing out.
Yeah, apparently.
I'm a huge fan of Clive Barker, and so I really enjoy these things when it's kind of the fantasy of Clive Barker's stories that, make you think that there's a world beyond. It seems like a lot of stories and ghost stories are really sort of specific unto themselves with really sort of, no history or anything in there that sort of ties it into anything other than, something bad happened and this is an echo of that or something. But anything that sort of conveys that there is this world and culture beyond, I find really interesting. So I do find the idea of these vampires and out there, and I'm always asking psychics when they're on, what's going on with the world beyond. And I don't know, you ever get a good answer on that from anybody?
That's a question we ask our psychics too. We've had a couple of psychics on over the summertime, and they're just one bride of many of the paranormal guests we have come on the show. And they often get elusive at first, and then they respond like they know more than we will, and they'll always know more than we will, but it's hard to lock them down in an answer. But I think my favorite was a psychic who came on, Carolyn Clapper, our first psychic, and she talks about this council of angels or councils of soul who sort of watch over the living and guide people through life and death, and then decide if you're good enough to come into the afterlife. And she'd met this council when she had gotten very sick when she was younger and died and passed on and come back. And you were saying we do love listening to ghost stories. We have many paranormal investigators come on the show who are seeking that truth. And I think it gives us comfort that there might be something beyond death. And it's the only glimpses we really have.
Yeah, I agree. It's the thing that really kind of throws me off about, because Sean and I, we started this show really kind of as skeptics. I don't know if skeptic is really the right word. As people who didn't know but were curious and interested but didn't really have any reason to believe anything. We came onto the and so I'm always sort of like, I don't know, looking for, like even with UFOs, I'm constantly looking for an intent. It's like I get all the stories, I get the facts, I get the stuff coming in, but it's like I've never really got a good answer for intent. And that's where I kind of get a little bit lost on some of these paranormal things, because I always want to know, like, the why, and I guess maybe that's what makes people skeptics.
And it's fun.
It is fun, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, as a horror writer, I assume you are also a horror fan, and I grew up just loving horror and, finding out, like, well, maybe there is something more, and that was really my gateway drug into paranormal.
I've always liked zombies, and we haven't done enough for zombies, and I'm so sorry to all the zombies out there. We will get to you. Promise, Caesar. So.
A lot of them aren't really good radio guests. A lot of one-word answers, brains and arg and all that, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
If you can get that out of them.
Yeah.
But,
it's in the way they say it. It really is.
Well, we don't have too long till the commercial break, so I'm going to stick on zombies here, because I have a bit of an issue with zombies, and you as a horror writer, I'm sure you have some input into this. I feel like the history of the zombie has been just sort of overwhelmed thanks to Richard Matheson, and oh gosh, why am I forgetting his name? He died. Night of the Living Dead. George Romero. I feel like the actual history of the zombie, it's like we don't get any of those cool, like, Serpent in the Rainbow or White Zombie or these kind of cool old sort of singular voodoo zombie things anymore, and I'm really kind of disappointed in that in horror.
Well, it was George Romero who created them, and when he originally created them, I think it was something like the zombie or the mindless flesh eaters. He hadn't really called them zombies or the living dead, and I have an issue with zombies too, and you touched on this. My issue is that zombies don't sell anymore. I would love to spend my nights writing zombie fiction, but nobody wants it anymore. It was an oversaturated market.
It was I hear they're making another spin-off of Walking Dead, and I read an interview with George Romero, and he said that he wasn't willing to direct a Walking Dead because it was basically just a big soap opera.
Yeah. They've beaten the undead to death.
They have. Yeah, totally, they have. But, I'm sure it'll come back around, and hopefully with a new twist. But, it starts to make you wonder, when they rehash things so many times, there comes a point where there's just like nothing new. So it's up to horror authors such as you to excite horror fans such as me.
Well, I hope they do, because I've got a folder full of zombie stories I'm trying to sell. So
yeah. All right. Well, when we come back, I'm hoping to talk about your new book. We have about a minute here to go. How many books have you written?
I've actually written 3 full-length novels at 60,000 words.
So this new one, Mercy, is your third book.
Well, there's some debate on that, because Mercy and my other book, Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality, or Searching for Andy Kaufman, came out about the same time.
I see. So it's in your first 3. It's tied for second.
It's in the trilogy.
All right. All right, so you are listening to our guest, T. Fox Dunham, here on Radio Wasteland. Come on back. We'll talk about his new medical thriller, Mercy. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland, and our guest, T. Fox Dunham, switching hats here, going from radio host to horror author. So I've had problems with with authors in general being on the show, because I don't want to ask them to give too much away from the book because the goal is that you want them to buy the book, So can you give us a quick rundown, a teaser trailer of what this book is about?
Absolutely. William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. He's stricken with fever, and he's rushed to a hospital, and he's in the last days of his life. And in those last days of his life, he's thinking about his past. He's haunted by broken hearts. He's haunted by regret. And when he gets to the hospital, they begin violating him, as doctors often do with medical tests, and torturing him. And he begins to learn that there's something wrong with this hospital. It's decaying. It's decrepit. And the doctors turn out to be something else, and they're feeding on him. They're preparing him. And his past explodes in front of him, and he must confront those regrets before moving on. That's misty enough for you?
That's completely terrifying.
Yeah, that is terrifying because, when I was reading a little bit about it, I'm just all like, is this supernatural? Because, one thing that I was reading about it was, sort of, it was saying that it was horror, but when I read the topic, I'm just all, this is potentially just very depressing, but
I think most horror walks that line of, honestly, this could happen.
It is, I read a lot.
Good horror, anyway.
It is. I read, and they're trying to give that teaser trailer without giving away, and so what you just told me definitely, spikes my interest. So really, aside from, supernatural, or even in the case of not supernatural, people getting stabbed to death in the face, all the stuff that goes on in horror. Don't look at me like that, Sean. You're not a horror fan. You don't know what goes on. When you're writing, what do you try to channel to? Do you have a plan, to build tension and release it, kind of like a horror movie does? Or, what's your writing process towards trying to write horror?
That's very much what I do. You do plan tension. You learn how to pace tension. It's a lot like writing music. You learn how to create what's called micro-tension. You do create a plan. And like a baker doing a souffle, you have to level it a certain way. Modern readers expect a rhythm. They expect a sine wave, a curve when you're writing fiction at the beginning, middle, and end. And they expect plateaus, crashes, larger plateaus, climax, twists. And I can actually see the chart in my head, and I've taken time to learn how to convert that sort of curve, that sine wave, from the modern novel into a plot where you can give the reader what they expect. Because if you mess those expectations up, the reader will put the book down.
Yeah, I definitely agree. There is room for people to break their mold, but for the most part, we want an exciting twist to something we feel comfortable in. That's why horror so often uses sexuality or comedy to make us feel comfortable before they stick us with fear,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So
juxtaposition.
Right, yeah. I've always wondered about writers in general, and I'm sure this is different for every writer. When you write a book, do you have the idea in your head, or do you actually write out an outline, maybe like you would a school paper? Anytime I've tried to write something, I've actually done this outline. Okay, so they go here, they do this, here's the, and I'm trying to create that roller coaster that you're talking about. What do you do there, or does it just kind of come out of you?
Right. Ideas come like quick flashes. They come like celestial visions. And they're fast, and they leave you with a moment of inspiration, but then you have to figure out how to apply that to the modern form. So I will get an idea, or I'll get a twist, or some piece or an element, or I'll go, oh, wow, what a great idea. That man's being possessed by a troll. But then you have to, like we were talking about, apply it to that sine wave, to that model. Because there are so many different elements, especially writing short fiction, there are so many different elements you can pick in a story, so many different character moments, but everything in the story has to be necessary. It has to push the plot along. It has to be pushing that reader to that expectation, to that climax, to that twist, and answering a certain question. Does he or she survive? Do they get killed by the zombies? Yes, they do, and this happens. But you also have to deal with theme and character growth and arc, which is not just do they survive, but how do they change and transform along the way. And it's a lot to figure out. It's a lot to plan. So yes, I will take out my notebook. I will take out my index cards.
So you do chart it on some level. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing, so I've always aspired ever since I was a kid to be an author. You know, I never succeeded at anything. I wrote a script or something twice. But so part of my fear of being an author myself has always been that inspiration does come in bursts, like you're saying. And I've always been sort of scared that each burst would have a different voice, carrying the inspiration of who I was at that time and what was going on in my life at the time. And while the story may match, that the voice doesn't necessarily match. Do you find that maybe that's the case and you go back through and have to tie the voice together depending on where you were at in your life when you were writing each part as it came?
That's very true. And it's not just about tying voice together. It's also about writing for the market that you want. There's a difference between writers and professional authors. A lot of people write, and they enjoy their writing, and there's no pressure on them. But to be an author, you have to learn to write from that inspiration, to write from your voice, but also to know how to create another voice, to write for the market that you're writing for a short story, which is very different than writing from fiction. You're not writing a novel. So yes, I will have to go back and change a particular story. Let's say if it gets rejected for one market, I want to send it off to a different theme or a different genre. I will have to go back and kind of find a synthesis, a synergy between the market elements and the audience expectations and my own voice, or who I was then and who I am now. And stories grow. You know, I wrote a story called The Last Elf, and it was published by Gray Matter Press by a friend, Anthony Riviera. And it took me 10 years to write this story, and it just went through so many evolutions. And finally, you know, looking back at the first draft and looking back at like the 11th draft, it had changed so much, but I could recognize that growth. So I guess the best way to say is you have to evolve to meet your fiction.
Yeah.
And your fiction has to evolve to meet you.
That makes a lot of sense. You know, I'm a musician, and so I write songs, and they tend to be, you know, shorter or at least less investment on it, on a word level, you know. And I found that when I'm creating things that I eventually have to pull myself away and say, no, you're done. You have to let the rawness of what you put in there come across, or you might just be, you know, tweaking and poking at this thing forever. You know, do you find that there's a time when you're writing where you basically have to say, no, I'm going to go through, dot some I's and cross some T's, and I need to be done, and I need to let that art come out, or I'm just never going to be done? You're
never done. I mean, a story will never be done because you're always changing and growing. And it's funny, I never finish my stories. I just run out of time.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
The deadline is due, and you have to get it off. But
I like that. I'm going to use that in my life. I like that.
Yeah, I tell other authors, I'm like, look, there's a point where you've got to stop. You've got to get it out there because we're perfectionists, and we're always chasing the vision, that translation of the vision into the words. And it's never going to be perfect. The moment it gets perfect, we're dead. We're bored. There's nothing left.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Or part of my problem, at least with songwriting, was that I'm putting so much of myself in there that by the time I'm done with the song, I might be a different person. And I look back at that song and I think, what an idiot wrote that. You know, and so that's kind of the hard part where I have to like cut it off and be, oh, no, I'm done. And you got to walk away. And so, you know, do you look back at your previous books and think like, oh man, I could have done that this way?
In horror, yes. It's very hard for me to read previous work and not see how I could have changed it and improved it. It's also reassuring because it lets me know that I'm growing, but it's also, if an author can look back at a story they wrote previously and feel comfortable with it, then they're in a good place because it never happens.
Right. All right. Well, we're coming up on our next commercial break here. You're listening to our guest, T. Fox Dunham, horror author and host of the podcast, What Are You Afraid Of? When we come back, we're going to talk about an event he has coming up here, Horror at the Fort. Come on back. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest T. Fox Dunham. So when we left, we were talking about your book, Mercy, and now we want to talk to you a little bit about this event you got, Horror at the Fort. What is this?
Yeah. Horror at Fort Mifflin. It's our second time doing it. Fort Mifflin is one of the country's oldest historic forts from the Revolutionary War in Philadelphia, and we have been honored to set up a horror authors event there. We did it last year, and we're doing it this year. I mean, I'm trying to promote more gathering and events for horror writing in Philadelphia. I mean, we didn't really have a horror community. It was very much like a deserted island around here. But, you know, I'm trying to bring people together, and we had some people come down from New York last time, and this time I'm focusing more on Pennsylvania authors, and it's a great event out there. We have vendors come out, we set up tables, and then we'll do a horror reading of several selected authors in Casement 5, which is just a haunted, spooky location. I mean, it's in this old fort, and it's very dark, and it's lit by candles and lanterns, and it's wonderful to have the horror authors go up there and, you know, give us their material. And then that night, there's a ghost hunt that they do, that people can come out, and you can find information about that at the website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. We'll have event information up there for anybody who wants to come out who's in the Philadelphia area on October 6th.
So is there an ample amount of fans in the area?
Yeah, there is. Every horror author has a sort of following in the area, friends, family, and people who come to local events. And, of course, horror author fans and horror fans are everywhere, and it's just a matter of reaching out to them.
Yeah, well, I tell my wife over and over that I want my retirement to be making a horror film, and she's just, oh, well, that's not really a realistic retirement. And I told her, oh, no, horror fans will watch anything. If you could afford to make one once, you could probably afford to make another one, because as a horror fan, I will literally watch 99 terrible films to find that one that is just absolutely beautiful.
And with Netflix, it's easier because we have, you know, a larger variety of horror films out there with less investment that you can take the time and find some real gems out there.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, I've been so busy I haven't had much time to read. I feel embarrassed admitting that, but I am a horror reading fan also. I just haven't had much of a chance to in the last 5 years. But man, this conversation has inspired me. And now knowing, and frankly, I got to tell you, you think that you're in the dry wastelands of like desert island of horror out there. You know, Reading is like culturally lacking in a lot of areas. So.
Well, then that's why you're online, though. You're on the radio. You're reaching out to people around the world.
Yeah. Which is odd, because Reading is exactly the sort of town you'd think would be haunted. It's like Sunnydale from Buffy or Twin Peaks from Twin Peaks. It's that kind of town, and yet there's nothing.
It's like Welcome to Night Vale.
Kinda. Yeah. I mean, right? Am I crazy here? It is. Yes?
It's a little bit, town, you know. All the dark things happen, you know.
Yeah, well, it's funny how...
I think you kind of nailed it there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, what about your first two books? I realize this one's tied for second. Were they horror? The first one seemed like it was maybe fantasy that you were just telling us about.
Well, that was my first book is actually called The Street Martyr, and it was a crime novel. I also write in all genres. I mostly got into horror because, to tell you the truth, it was the best-selling genre that you could break into.
That's what I was saying, man. Loyal fans in horror.
Yeah.
And my first novel was The Street Martyr, which was about two low-level, sort of incompetent Philly drug dealers who get blamed for the gruesome death of a priest. And they have to prove their innocence while coming to terms with their lives. And I'm happy to say that'll actually be a major motion picture from Throughline Films. It's in production now.
Awesome.
And yes, that was a lucky stroke for me. And that was crime. And my second book, Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality, or Searching for Andy Kaufman, again, it's about my story with cancer, because I was diagnosed at 18 with a rare lymphoma that I nearly didn't survive. And so a lot of these books are a catharsis for my battle with cancer. And that's more of a whimsical, insane, philosophical novel, also very much like the comical stylings of Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, well, the title, when I read that title, it definitely brought to mind electric Kool-Aid acid test and sort of these crazy titles. So when I read the title, I'm just, oh man, what is this thing about?
And that was the effect,
Yeah.
If Andy Kaufman were alive, he and I would definitely be besties today.
Awesome. So, we're not too far from the end of the show here. So, can you tell our audience about where they can find out more about What Are You Afraid Of podcast, and really mostly where they can get a hand on your book?
Well, you can go over to our website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com, where we've got a page for every episode with information for our guests. Plus, we have an archive of ghost stories on there that people have sent in, that we also have an audio narrative read by our voice actors on there. It's a wonderful British voice actor called David Walton, who does a lot of our narrations, and he's incredible. Now, I have a website over www.tfoxdunham.com. It's still kind of under construction, but you can also go over to Amazon or just type in T. Fox Dunham on the internet, and my books will pop up.
And so now that you've finished this book, of course, there's a lot of pushing it on the road. But what's next for you? What are you working on?
Next, I'm working on some short fiction, working on some crime fiction, working on another sort of horror novel called Mr. Bones that I'm shopping around for a publisher for, and a sort of sci-fi novel that I'm getting into. But it's always short stories pop up. I have one coming up on Near to the Knuckle this Wednesday called Tongue. It's a crime story. And just, stories pop up. You take the job, you work on them, and try to put more time into your books. You get so distracted. Yeah.
It seems like, switching gears would be difficult. I'm an owner of a business, but I also do a lot of the work, and I find that switching from the work to the administration can be incredibly difficult, although you still have to train yourself to do it. And in looking at artists and writers and these people, the people who truly find some success are the people who are able to switch somewhat effectively.
Right, and it's very much, I always call it juggling. You're juggling worlds constantly. And today I need to be working on a crime story. Tomorrow I want to put work into this horror novel. And the next day I need to jump back and write an article. So it's always good to have good notes around. But in the end, it's very jolting. It's like waking up from a nightmare, falling asleep, and falling into another dream.
Well, we really enjoyed having you on the show. We're here at the end. Can you give us the website one more time?
Sure. The podcast website is www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com. And you can also find me at www.tfoxdunham.com and also on Amazon. Just type that in. And the book is Mercy, my horror hospital thriller about my battle with cancer made metaphor.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been totally interesting and very inspiring. I'm going to hate working my typical day job tomorrow as I fantasize about all the things that I could have been.
Well, when you go home, you can start reading Mercy, so there you go. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being on the show. You've been listening to T. Fox Dunham here on Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. You've been listening to our guest, T. Fox Dunham, talk about his podcast and his new book. And, I've had issues with authors being on in the past, not because of them in any sort of way.
Yes, though we do hate them.
We hate them, Paul Blake Smith, hate him. Yeah. Totally hate him. Actually, I don't hate him.
We have a hate shrine.
I totally love him.
No,
here's the hard part with authors, is you want to talk to them, but without giving away the whole story of the book.
Exactly.
And so I think he struck a nerve with both of us as something that, we'd love to be doing, but we're just not.
Oh, yeah. Well, I went to college for specifically writing.
To be a writer.
Yes.
You're right.
And I spent 4 years listening to writers talk about writer things and writing and being in workshops and that sort of thing. And then I got out of college and my work ethic just evaporated.
Right.
So, as it does, you get into the real world and you're just like, nah, I'm just going to watch Netflix for, when I'm not working.
So is that really what you do? You just watch Netflix?
No, I don't, but...
What do you do, Sean? What do you do instead of writing?
I do write, but the problem is kind of what you were talking about, that I start something and then I'm like, nah, this is no good.
Right.
And then I start another thing.
Insecurity, fear of completion,
Pretty
all these
much.
things, yeah.
And the other thing is that, there's two halves of this whole thing. And I spent 4 years learning the one half, which is knowing how to write. Mm-hmm. The other half is knowing anything about the business of writing.
Right, yeah.
Which
he
they
made
do
some
not
good
teach.
points there. He made some good points there. And like
he really did. And that's the kind of thing that I was learning from professors who in many cases, largely became professors because they'd gotten burned out of being professional writers and harbor deep grudges and resentments against the entire publishing apparatus. So the last thing they want to
those who can't teach.
So the last thing they want to talk about is how to appease the publishers that they left writing and went into teaching to avoid.
Right.
They don't want to talk about those people. They want to talk about, the type of writing they like, which is not necessarily what sells.
So maybe all of these, anybody who goes to school to be an artist,
which is a terrible decision.
Maybe should have to take a class on Andy Warhol. Somebody who mixed marketing with art. I'm sure that there are others, but he's the first example of somebody who truly mixed marketing and art together. It's like my kids, they say, over the years they've said different things. I want to be a photographer. I want to make music. I want to do these things. And I'm just that's awesome. Do you want to go to college? And they say yes. And I say, well, then if you want to be a photographer, I suggest you minor in photography and you major in business.
Yeah.
No,
see, that's a good idea. But it doesn't always occur to you when you're a senior in high school.
No.
And you hate all things business related.
I was never a senior in high school, but I can imagine not a lot of things occur to you when you are.
No,
because when I was supposed to be a senior in high school, being a senior in high school didn't even occur to me, apparently.
Right. Well, teenagers are, technically speaking, idiots. So
Right. Yeah, well, my buddy Chad used to say that when you turn 25, your brain falls out of the side of your head. And then on his 25th birthday, he's just maybe it's 26.
Yeah, or maybe he thinks that because his brain fell out.
Right.
I doubt you'd notice.
So
I'm 25, unfortunately.
So how do you motivate yourself to do this?
I don't know. I feel.
How does one motivate themselves? Not you. I understand that you're having this crisis as well, the crisis of completion.
Right.
How does one push themselves through this? Because I want to do it too. I have this whole, all these years I thought I had a fear of failure. Mm-hmm. And people said, well, I think you have a fear of success. And I'm just oh man, that's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. A fear of success. What is that? But if I analyze the things that I've done through my life, on some things, I will literally get 98% of the way done. And then I'll be I'm done with that. It's I don't, I don't want to let it go. It's become a part of me and I don't want to let it go. I have comic books that I've drawn. I have scripts that I've written. I literally have a lot of stuff that I have never really shown to any other human being in the world. Mm-hmm. Just because I'm just oh no, that's mine now.
Well, honestly, I think it's a lot of the same thing. You do the part that you know how to do, which is you produce the creative thing.
Right.
And then you don't do the part that you don't know how to do, which is showing it to people.
Right.
Which is much harder. And most people don't know how to do that, really.
Right.
Most people don't like doing that. I did it in college because it was required due to the classes.
Right. That's what we need.
And, people liked it. Yeah, right. I got a lot of good feedback. It was always a really good thing. We need to do what
this guy's doing. He's shopping around for a publisher first. I didn't even know you could do that.
Well, I think you can once you've gotten a few things out there.
So you got to have some stuff out there.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
You've got to burst through the door.
Well, here's part of my problem. Everybody has some form of mental illness, really, if you haven't been watching the news and watching everybody's got something.
Actually, to shed some light on this, I was reading, it's literally 50% of people.
Yeah.
So not everybody, but half. Half of people are diagnosed with something.
Right, and the other half are just not diagnosed yet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the thing that I've struggled with throughout my life is apathy.
Sure.
I just don't give a rat's ass. It's my escape. I'll care about things and I'll be, oh no, it's too hard. I don't care. So it's been so ingrained in me to not care that the idea of pushing myself out there, I just don't see how anybody would give a rat's ass about what I was doing whatsoever. Why would anybody in their right mind even slightly care?
Oh, is that the end?
No, yeah, okay. I'm not really looking for an answer.
I thought you were going to turn that into something motivational.
Well,
but then
I think
sentence just ended.
I think I just stumbled across my own answer to that, and that is nobody's in their right mind because they're all mentally ill. So apparently, maybe they will care.
Yeah. No, in all honesty, I have written books before in my life. I haven't gotten them published, but that in itself is. You just do a laughably small amount at a time.
Right.
And eventually it's done. That's the way it is with everything.
All right. Well, T-Fox Dunham, if you're out there and you're listening, we really appreciate it.
And
hopefully
good on you.
Hopefully you inspired us. Maybe one of us will complete something and dedicate it to T-Fox.
Yes.
All right. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. Come on back for the news. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Sean, you got some news?
Yeah, so speaking of writers, there's a thing that one of the writers said to me a long time, one of my professors said to me, and it really stuck with me, because we were in a writing workshop and a bunch of people had written dystopian short stories, and this is not her favorite genre, so she was fed up with it. And so what she said was,
how many Stephen Vincent Benets does the world need?
Exactly. Yeah. She's more of a memoir person. So she was like, I don't want to read all this.
Well, she sounds a lot of fun.
Fiction.
She sounds like she's a lot of fun.
Yeah, she's great, actually. But
totally. She knows how to put down a bottle of wine.
So what she said,
all right, go ahead.
And it stuck with me, was that, you can't come up with something dystopian that isn't happening somewhere in the world right now. And it's like, that's kind of true. Like, if you're going to college in California in the bubble of Santa Barbara or living in the dorms or whatever, and they feed you, things can look pretty good.
Yeah, but it's dystopian for your parents who are paying your meal card.
Yeah. And it's dystopian for people who are, say, not in the United States.
Right, yeah.
Or a developed country. And that's something we forget a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this is all tying into a topic that has nothing to do with anything we've been talking about today, but one of the largest underground churches in China, there have been crackdowns recently. This has been a big thing in the regime of Xi, I think is how you say it, Mr. Xi. He's really been cracking down on religious freedoms lately, and that's been kind of a huge deal in China. So, the thing about China is that they have freedom of religion so long as you stick to one of the state religions, of which there are 6 or 7.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So, what is that? Buddhism, Hinduism?
No, there's various. There's like a state Catholic church. Like there's versions of all these different religions, but they're heavily regulated by the state.
So what's this underground church?
So many people in China do not attend services at state-sanctioned churches. They attend, underground churches. This was one of the largest Protestant underground churches in Beijing. And recently, they've been complaining that officials from the government have been coming in and harassing people and destroying their stuff and all that kind of thing. So, now this isn't technically paranormal or anything like that, but we do discuss conspiracies a lot here.
Absolutely.
We discuss the dystopian, we discuss all this sort of thing, and honestly, just me reading this, I was like...
There's your dystopian novel.
I tend to assume every country is just the U.S., but with a different language and different food.
Right, yeah.
But it's like, no. It's, some of the largest countries in the world are pretty darn dystopian, frankly. That's how most people in the world spend their lives. Religious freedom? No.
Right.
You get 6 churches.
Right. Look at China, 6 churches,
exactly.
or look at Russia.
Right.
What they do to their people, or we were just talking earlier that it just legally became legal in India for consensual gay sex. It's like
exactly. And you slap together India and China, and that's a significant portion of the people on the planet.
Yeah, I'm thinking more than half.
Yeah.
Well over half.
Yep.
So, yeah, that is dystopian. That is crazy. And she has a good point. But, I mean, there are dystopian stories out there that are not currently going on.
Oh, that's true.
Look at Snowpiercer.
Yeah. I mean, that's
there's nobody riding a train around the planet.
Yeah. So, I mean, she wasn't literally correct. But in a figurative sense, there was a good point going on there.
There was. And... a lot of those dystopian novels did play off of the world today, but the world today is not moving so incredibly quickly that they are obsolete. Technology has come into play in a much larger way, but, there is the one angle of 1984. There's the one angle of Brave New World. There's The Handmaid's Tale.
All the time, different little pieces of these stories are relevant.
Right. And the one that I find to be the most accurate for the way that at least the United States is going is the one
Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, Fahrenheit 451, the one that people would probably say isn't, but it was driven there via capitalism. It was not that not that I have a problem with capitalism, But that's the path we're on, and so
it was a dystopia that the consumers demanded.
Right, exactly. That's the path we're on, so it creates a plausible future there. So, like, if we could, or what is it? Was it China, the social media rating system?
Yeah, so that was also China, and I brought that up, I don't know, a few months ago for I think similar reasons, because these are just it's crazy to us here. Because we are, raised on a diet of dystopian movies and all of these kinds of things. And concepts like that, I think the first place our mind goes is fiction, not China.
We've had that,
and then you realize this is real in some places.
Exactly.
For a lot of people.
We've had that discussion on paranormal and especially aliens, that anytime somebody proposes some sort of potential reality that's already been done in fiction, people automatically scoff it off.
Exactly.
As though there's no way it could be reality because fiction already covered it.
When the one guy called in and said, hey, no, that's an Outer Limits episode.
Oh, right.
It's like, yes, because every possible motivation of aliens has already been covered in fiction, pretty much.
Totally. It's a rich genre.
So, one day the scales will fall from our eyes or whatever, and we'll see the truth, and we'll be like, hey, that's just like that episode of, X-Files or Fringe or whatever.
Right.
It'll be like something.
All right. Well, you are listening to Radio Wasteland. Our question to end our show is, which dystopian novel do you think we're living? Have a good evening.
Hate to see you hungry, love to see you starve. I'd hate to see you smiling at me like you used to. Wanna meet the stars, I'd hate to hear you want me. Hate to hear I do. I'd hate to have you holding my hand as I hate to stand next to you, but I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I hate to hear I love you. I hate to say it too. I'd hate to walk on up to your house just to see you. I hate to hear your voice on the telephone crying, baby, I can't live without you. Johnson, please come home, but I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I hate to see them off. I'd hate to see the shimmer of your skin in the bathtub while we talked. I'd hate to be in your bed. I'd hate to have our bus. I'd hate to hold you till 3 a.m. Smelling your blood lungs. Hate to see you happy. Hate to see you sad when you're looking at me. Seeing me as dad. I hate the beauty in your face. I hate the beauty in you. I'd hate for us to tell each other we're in love like we used to do, but I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I can't control myself. I can't control myself. I can't control myself like you used to do. I hate to see it all. See it all. Hate to see it all. Hate to see it all. Hate to see it all. Love 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 to see it all.